James here, Cobra Engineering again. Another Cobra Tech Talk. Today we're going to put the camshafts in this long block. And then after we do that, we're going to do all the front timing gear here. And it's going to show you all the little things. We're going to try to cover every little base so that you get everything. I already did the other side. I'll show that fast forward video later. Right now we'll focus on what I have is a chart that shows me which cam goes where and the numbers. I'll put that up right now. You can pause the video and look at that. Because what these are 96, 98 Cobra cams. There's two reasons we use these. Number one, the intake is a 204 duration as opposed to a 196. It's my understanding the exhaust is the same. The main reason we don't reuse the 0304 Cobra exhaust is the 12mm hardware. You get an M12 bolt instead of an M10. A lot more torque, and it holds that timing gear on the front, the main sprocket. To start real simple, I cleaned everything already. These cams have been cleaned top to bottom. You could use brake clean on there, a little residue isn't going to matter. Just so you know, brake clean leaves residue. And I lube. Free assembly lube, whatever your preferred is. Now on these front journals, you got to get the front and the back. That's the thrust for the cam, so it can't walk forward and back. So that will need some oil on it. There will be some load on there. Just go through. Some of you may be shocked to find out these cams ride right in aluminum with no bearing. And it seems to work, but you got to remember the cam turns at half the speed the engine does. So even at 8,000 RPM, this thing's only turning 4,000. It's not much. As long as you're not running a crazy camshaft with some crazy strong springs, there's no reason to kill yourself with anything fancier than what's factory. What I have here is the lifters, or the lash adjusters as they're properly called. Tupperware bin from the house, steal that from your wife, maybe have one without a cover one day and then, oh, I got a use for that, let's bring that out in the garage. Put the lash adjusters in there, pour some oil in there, let that sit at least overnight. What you want is all the oil and all the air to work out and the oil to work its way in. Nothing fancy here, you're dropping them in the holes. Of course, you're making sure that was all clean. Hopefully you have good clean heads when you start. And it's going to make a mess. Who cares? It's oil. You're inside the engine. Go ahead and drop them in the bores. I don't put the followers, or some of you might call them the rockers, in. I wait until after I degree, and then I only do the cylinders I'm degreeing at a time, and then I add them all later. As I had mentioned, a degreeing video will be coming. It will be tedious and probably be multiple parts. And I'm going to try to find a good way to show you all the questions that you have. Make sure they're all down. I've done the bottom. Now I put these in order already. I went through my paperwork and I put these by the numbers on them. Don't trust anything, in other words. In the order that I'm going to put them in the engine. It doesn't hurt to take a marker and label them. Now remember, this front journal right here is the thrust journal. So make sure you get that one pretty good, because you want to push a little of that assembly lube out into the thrust surfaces. Now the rest of them, the journals are actually bigger than the seat where they go in. So you don't have to be too crazy. You just want it around the middle. And don't forget the end. It sits in there also. The way I do is I hold it in the middle and the front. And just slowly drop that in. Don't be dinging anything up. Wiggle it a little bit. Good to go. Next, exhaust cam, or intake cam, I'm sorry. Do the same thing. That's the old theory, you can't get too much oil in an engine, so this is where you get dirty and who cares. Same deal. Hands up. I've got the caps here. As you can see, they do go a specific way. So you're going to want to move these just the same as the bottoms. Stay on one side or the other. So a little trick is if you have OEM hardware, which is perfectly fine, these brass or zinc plated bolts are always on the bottom, on the exhaust side of the engine. They're a little shorter. On both sides, this tab is the same size as this large protrusion, which actually takes the oiling and controls the oiling. Now, it's a little counterintuitive. You're going to see the notches on these caps. You're going to see them on the bottoms, and you would think it'd be for the spark plugs, but it's really for the head studs. And on the top, I'm not even sure why those are there. That is true. I like to take, just give them a little tap down. Don't force it, but you want it seated. Good already. Clean. Don't torque them down with this. You're just running them down. Of course, I say that. And I'm going to use the torque wrench here in a minute. But honestly, even on my own engine, I would probably just use the old arm bender. Snug them up. They're M6 bolts. They don't have crazy torque values. About 10 foot-pounds. The Ford manual here says, what was it, torque turn 12 to 26 Newton meters. So, take that for what it's worth. Now I did set the torque wrench, and according to the Ford paperwork here, we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on all of them. 1, 2. You see, it isn't much torque. I always try to go left to right like you read a book, top to bottom, just like you read a book. That way you're always consistent, you're not missing any. You know exactly where you're at. Frankly, after I'm done with this video, I'm going to go back and I'm going to double check all of this. Don't forget this one right here last, where you're grabbing oil right there. There we go. Turns nice. Turns nice. Have a little bit of resistance, but very little. I don't know how to maybe turn it into a beater in some oil or something. I'm not even good. I don't have a good example. Now I take this, And yeah, I'm a little premature. I'm not jumping in there and throwing the followers in yet. But I'd rather have these lobes covered in some kind of oil and not rusting or corroding than sitting bare. Because I clean those things really good. And if you got some moisture in the air or something going on, you could have a real bad day. There we go. It looks good. They spin nice. I'll turn this around and we'll get the timing gear set up and we'll get all that on. Alright, I'm going to show you how to put together the secondary tensioners. We'll start with the driver's side or left hand. It's very simple. This is what's inside. I had to tear these apart and clean them because this was an already running engine. Just a little bit of oil on there. Drop that in. Well, it went in the wrong way. You got to make sure that the little button is facing up. Can be a little tricky sometimes. I don't know if you can see in there, but the little button's up. That just goes on that little button. I take a little bit of oil, put it around the cylinder. Now, turn the ring so the split is towards you. Apply pressure. You can take a pair of pliers and squeeze that ring together a little bit. Makes it easier to start. Once you're started, push her down. Oh, got away from me. The spring is tight. And you insert your pin right through the plastic. And that goes through the hole in the back of the plate here. And it just locks it in. Now you can install that on the engine easily. I want you to notice the notch goes away from the mounting surface. The same on the bottom. If you have questions, it's the same as the bottom. That's where the primary chain is going to run. That's a little clearance for it. Same thing here. This is on my tensioner. Like I said, I had to tear it apart to clean it. He'd already had it assembled on the engine. The button goes up. The plastic goes down in the hole. A little bit of oil on there. Fingers a little. Try to pinch that ring together. It's almost like a piston ring. It's a little stubborn. Don't be afraid. Wiggle. There we go. Now I didn't have another good pin, but a paper clip works. Same thing. Goes right through. You see between the plastic and that. The notch is facing away from. It'll be facing towards you when installed. Alright, now I got the primary tensioners. I'll show you how to disassemble, clean these. We're going to grind a couple of the teeth off of these ratchet mechanisms. I'll explain why. Let's start by disassembling. I like to take a Harbor Freight woodworking clamp, nothing fancy. Holds it together nice. Believe it or not, I do a little woodworking now and then. I'm going to turn that around. You can see in here you can release this ratchet mechanism. But what we're going to want to do is turn this 180 degrees so that the smooth side is facing that ratchet. And then we would work it out like this. It's not coming out super easy. We got her. So here you can see you got the ratchet. And what that does, as the chain stretches, it works its way out and lets it tension more and more, but it doesn't return all the way. The reason they don't want to return all the way is so it doesn't jump teeth. Then we're going to slowly release the spring. Make sure to hold it or else that spring will go flying. There we go. Pull that out. There's a spring in there and a plunger, just like the secondaries. Now we clean that out. I'm going to show you how to grind these. You're going to want to take about 3 to 4 of these teeth off on the bottom. That way, if your chain ever stretches, say you did a 2-step or the chain just basically gets out too far, it can return. It won't overstretch your chain. I'll show you that in a minute. Alright, I've ground the teeth on here, as you see. Simple. Just go on the bench grinder. Take off the bottom 3 to 4 teeth. That way that'll never lock too far out and overstretch your chains. It's real simple, that locking mechanism right there. It'll release at least back to there. A lot of people put spacers in here so that these don't ever retract too far. I've never had a problem with that, and this isn't a race engine. I think if you had a race engine that would be appropriate. Before I clean these, I ran them on some Scotch-Brite. Make sure that face is nice and clean. Same thing as the secondaries, little disc, a little bit bigger on this one. Make sure the button is up. Take the piston, a little bit of oil on it. These go in a lot easier. There's no ring type on these. Same thing, I'm going to take this, run it down. All the way in. Take the piston, or the ratchet, I'm sorry. Locking. Inside there, you're going to want to push that to one side. Take that back. Put it in backwards. It's going to go by that a lot easier, but you're still going to want to start it with this. Oh, it's going to be tough. Don't be afraid to give it a tap. Yep, once you get it started like that, it's not that big a deal. Now make sure you turn it to where the ratchet teeth are on that ratcheting mechanism. Release that one. Come over, do the same thing on this one. Make sure that button's up, nice and flat in the bottom. A little bit of oil on the piston. Yes, you could use assembly lube on there, it wouldn't matter much. There we go. Same thing, get it backwards. Get it started in there. It's going to be tough. Once you're in there down the ways, turn it 180. Now you can see it's sticking up there some. Push that down, it's ratcheted. Lock pin goes right there. Now release. Had a little trouble with this one. I'm going to work on that off camera, and I'll get that working well before we put it on the engine next. Alright, now that we got our tensioners all set aside and cleaned up and ready to put on the engine, we'll show you what goes on first. We'll start by turning this keyway on the crank right about up this cylinder bank, maybe 10 o'clock. That's about top dead center for number 1. This is a handy tool you can pick up anywhere. It's a crank turning tool with a socket goes on, or your ratchet goes on the end for a small block Chevy. About the same size crank. Works great for turning that without putting a bolt in there. When I start, we're going to put the oil pump on. So what I do is I take a little alcohol. Because remember how I said brake clean leaves a little residue? Alcohol does not. And it'll clean that surface good there. I'm going to do the same thing on the oil pump. But not a lot, but just a finger, and take a little bit of RTV and run her right around there real thin. Normally from the factory it would just be metal to metal. So we're not trying to be a hero here, we just want to really make sure we keep our oil pressure in the engine. Maybe take a rag, get it on the inside there. You don't want it in the oil. We've got the oil pump here. This is a boundary with a billet plate. And as I throw the bolts on the floor, there's these 3 bolts, these black ones. These are factory. They go in these 3 positions. The first you want to notice the flats on the crank right here, and there's 180, and there's the ears inside the pump. You can turn it. It may take a little finagling, but you'll get it turned around in there. Pretty close. You don't have to be dead nuts. Wiggle it until it seats on there. It's not seating right now, so I don't have it lined up right. Get a little more. You'll know. And you got it right there. Right on. Try to get it straight on to that RTV. It sits on there nice. Got one up here. One at the very top. And one down here. Now remember, I'm not torquing them down with this. Oh, that's the wrong socket. Still seem to work pretty good. We'll come back when we're done and we'll actually take the torque wrench after all these. Notice how this hole is left open. We'll move on to that right now. This is the driver's side stationary guide. Notice this bolt is much longer. It goes all the way through the oil pump and everything. And then the other one's up here in the head. And it hugs really tight to this lower side here. These are all M6. So about the same 90 Newton meters. Sorry, 90 inch-pounds, 10 Newton meters. That's all in place now. Now we can move on to our tensioner pins. Or, not tensioner pins, I'm sorry. These are Cobra Engineering. These are the 8mm that work well with a factory guide. No drilling needed. If you have the 9mm pins, you can drill that hole out to match it. So I'll get a little red Loctite on there. Notice how I have the washer on there. Just run it in. And the washer is big, because we don't want to catch that radius on the back side of the head of this. There's a radius on there to add strength to it. But that strength, in order to get that, you need the head, the shoulder basically, to be on the block, on the washer, putting load on the block. So center that washer as best you can. 20 foot-pounds. It's a 5/8 socket. That's it. That's not going anywhere. We'll drop hands today. All right. Now I pre-drilled this block already. In fact, it has the extra hole for a terminator timing cover with my drill fixture. I'll put that video at the end. You can click on that. I have a video on using that drill fixture. Oh, get that centered a little better. Don't be afraid. There we go. Perfect. Now that those are on, now we go to the passenger side. Nope. Come on. There we go. Let's run them in. Alright, now as good a time as any to torque those. Stick to our left to right. And you just seen what I did, didn't you? Just buried that oil pump bolt where I couldn't get the torque wrench on it. That's alright. Easy fix. Okay, now we move on to secondary chain tensioners. Start with the driver's side. This one goes in pretty straightforward. And Cobra Engineering secondary tensioner on this side. Just use the 2 factory bolts. Run those down. Again, these are M6, so we can torque to the same 90 inch-pounds or 10 Newton meters. Alright, now we can put the secondary chains on. Here I'm showing you a picture of the chains, the way they line up. Keyways down, timing marks up. Pretty straightforward. Just goes in like this. Pull the pin. Now the driver's side is a little different because we use 96, 98 cams. I had to grind the keyways on the back. These keyways aren't cut square all the way to the back like more recent cams. So I made sure these fit on there good. And sometimes get a wiggle. Turn the cam a little bit more. There we go, same story. Pull the pin. Oh, that one's a little tighter. Maybe I'll push down on it a little first. Now here you see the importance of changing the direction this is tensioned. This is the slack side of the chain. This is the driven side. When it pulls on this side, it's fixed now. Same thing on the driver's side. This was engineered correctly And basically they were lazy. They had the piston down, they made the piston down. So they tension the driven side instead of the slack side. This fixes that. Now we move on to the primary gears. Start with the driver's side first. The gear's going to have a tab on it like this. There's nothing here. There's actually a dent on this side. This tab needs to face towards you, away from the engine. The cam sensor picks that tab up when the engine's turning. Take our primary chains. I'll show you that picture now. You got the marked links on either end. And if the links aren't marked, just lay them out like that, exactly opposite, and take a marker and mark them, because that's how it is. The crank sprocket. The timing mark is straight down. Notice, remember, the keyway is up this way. These stick sometimes. I have to give it a little love tap. Remember, we're going to get that marked link. Either you marked it or it's still marked from the factory. Straight down. Don't be afraid to get in there and get friendly. Now you're going to come up here. And there's going to be a mark right here. It's hard to see on this one, but it's right on this link right here. I'm going to want that right there. And you may want to take this off and get it on there. Get that chain there, maybe knock this on a little bit. Takes a little finessing sometimes. Be afraid of it. Get in there, maybe just tap that a little bit. Don't get too crazy because we're going to get the other one on yet. We're going to move on to the passenger side. We'll move around that sprocket so it doesn't all dry. You don't have to go crazy on this, but a little something helps. Now this one, there's a little, it's taller than this. The taller side goes towards the engine. You don't want that chain near the secondary chain. Grab that primary chain. That's marked also, either by you or you still see the factory marks. Same story. Start on here. Get the marked link on the bottom. Roll it around. And there's a marked link right here, the marked sprocket. Have to turn that a little bit to get it on there. There we go. Now we can drive this back on all the way. I'm going to take this, I'm going to tension it up against there, tension it up against there. Now we can get our guides on. Test fit here, make sure everything fits good. Test fit here, make sure everything lines up good. Alright, we get a little lube on there, of course. Now, driver's side one has a little higher area on it. The passenger side one is flat. It's got this raised boss here that goes on the driver's side. Lines up nice. This one goes on here. Lines up nice. Now we move on to the primary tensioners. Marked clearly left, right. Now, here's a good time to explain. I'm looking at the engine, this is my right, but it's the left side of the engine. They label engines when you're sitting in the seat, in the driver's seat. Think of it that way. This can go just on here, just dry like this. I got new hardware. Wasn't sure where his good hardware went. Run that in. Where the right side is the passenger side. The left side is the driver's side. I put that on wrong. You can make fun of me for that. Alright. There we go. Now it's easier to put one in, rotate it in. Same thing on this side. This one went in a little easier. Oh! My lock fell out on that one. Now these will be torqued to 20, actually about 18, because they're M8s. Pull that pin, make sure that lines up there, make sure that one's working well. Everything seems nice and tight. It's all set there. The only thing left to do is get your washer and your hardware. Now I didn't put any ARP lube on these, and I'm not going to torque them down today because we're going to do the degree of the camshaft on here, and I may have to take this off to do that. You got to remember here on the driven cams, you got the spacers. Otherwise, this washer won't put any thrust on that gear. So you got to remember that spacer. That one on here. And there's the keyway cut in there, but it's irrelevant. You can put it opposite, the same, whichever makes you feel better. Run those in and run that. There we go. We have all the timing gear on. The only thing left I would do is take some lube. I'll run it right down the chains, everywhere that's exposed. Because why have anything run dry? I'll just dump some motor oil over this. That would be fine too. Nothing wrong with that. No. We take our crank tool, put a ratchet on there, and we watch everything turn. Looks good, everything's lining up. The thing I would have liked to do different is I would have put some lube on these guides. Like I said, I'm going to pull this apart to do the green anyway. So I'll deal with that then. Just like that again. That's it. Well, that's all I got today. We got all the timing gear on, we got our cams in, we're ready for degreeing. And like I said, we're going to do a nice in-depth video on how to degree a 4-valve Cobra engine. You're going to want to subscribe, and of course it helps if you like, the routine on YouTube. I sure appreciate you guys sticking around, and I sure hope you come back to see more videos. Thanks.